and where I have been able to influence and impact. And ultimately, it's been on a very intimate level. It's been working in these smaller circles, working with, in different employment capacities, working at peers, doing counseling services. The intimacy, I think, is where I'm really starting to see where the victory actually lies with murdered and missing Indigenous women. It is a national and global problem where women are continuing to be dehumanized. And so where can I personally, because I feel like this conversation is about a personal reflection, and it starts with the self. It starts with each and every one of us learning to love ourselves, really, really loving ourselves. The hardest thing to do is to look at yourself in the mirror and to accept every aspect of yourself, to accept and integrate all of that trauma, all of that narrative that has been passed down to us. How do we sift through that? How do we accept it? How do we become vulnerable to it? How do we let it transform us? And so on these big topics like murdered and missing Indigenous women, I come away feeling mostly, I wouldn't say disempowered, but I would say sometimes that I think the fight and the resistance of looking towards government to solve problems really diverts from that energy that we could put back within ourselves first, and then within our intimate circles of women, and then in the community where we can, and especially with our children and our daughters. And when I become a grandmother one day, that's something that, you know, I'm going to take really seriously in that role, is how do I make sure that my grandchildren and my daughters are growing up knowing that they can do anything, that anything is possible, that they can go into any employment, that they can be seen and heard and validated and respected. Like, that starts from the internal self-esteem. So that's where I'm really wanting to contribute to this conversation, is that and it is hard because it puts me on the edge of maybe being perceived as discrediting that, I guess this is just my fear, that being disregarding that people have been victimized and have been murdered and have gone missing, that are innocent people. And so I don't want to discredit that, because that is also the case as well. You know, some of the perception of murdered and missing Indigenous women is that these women are on the streets, that these women are in already vulnerable positions. And that is true too. Like, there's so many different narratives that encompass this. And this is why I think it's so important to gather in circles and to challenge one another as well. You know, I don't have the experience that some other people have, you know, having direct family members, their sisters, their mothers. Like, I don't have that experience, so it's hard to come from that place. But I also honor that tremendously, that people are working through that grief and the injustice and not having, I mean, even our police force, our RCMP, to even give the same accreditation to these murders and these disappearance of women. And so I feel for that as well. In my art practice, you know, I think in parallel with the murdered and missing Indigenous women, I think in parallel with all of this, you know, this national movement that's been happening for a couple of years, with the changing of the culture of the visibility of a red dress, that's changing the connotations of a red dress. The power of art has the power to be able to do that. It's hard not to look at a red dress. I wore a red dress today, and I wore a red dress because I wanted to wear a red dress. You know, outside of honoring the murdered and missing Indigenous women, I just also wanted it to be a red dress. But I'm saying this because it's hard to not see a red dress without thinking about the murdered and missing Indigenous women. So I think the repetition and the continuation of constantly pushing our narratives forward is extremely important. You know, and it starts with the love of the self. and which is the hardest place to go sometimes. And so those are the types of things that I've been thinking about. And in my art practice in particular, I really had to really bring it down to the seed of what can I do? And part of it is how I strategize making art, you know, making sure the circle is safe, making sure people have agency and autonomy, self-determination. Like, this is a lot of the ways that I strategize my projects, is about healing ultimately. And so those parameters, and I have to be conscientious of working with human beings. And so how do I create art where fundamentally I'm working on a human level, outside of the presentation of the work, outside of if the work goes into exhibition or if I get credited for it, that's always secondary. You know, if I'm in a counseling session and if I'm have the hat of a therapist on, you know, those ultimate moments of transformation are always emotional. And so this work is emotional. It has to be emotional. The work has to be projected and held and presented in a way not to theorize that this is possibly happening, but ultimately emotionally, because it is happening, you know. And I think that's the way that we transform culture is through their layers, right? It's like the education and the awareness, and then I think the heart-centered work that Walking with Our Sisters exhibition, other exhibitions, the blanket exercise, talking about residential schools. These are national movements artistically that happen and travel that people can engage, where the access to some of this work wouldn't be on as big of a scale if it wasn't mobilized, you know. And so I think any artist that is working in a way to challenge stereotypes, to uphold the beauty and the generosity and the amazingness of our cultures and the expressions of it, you know, it's each of us that are being enlightened by each other. And so how do we really do that woman to woman, you know? How do we really honor other women? How do I honor women in my life? How do I honor my mother and my grandmother and my daughters? And we have a lot of trauma to work through. We have a lot of trauma to work through. And I think it needs to be normalized that our shortcomings and our mistakes, and they need to be, you know, met with compassion and empathy, and knowing that we're all moving through a very toxic, colonizing country, you know, that has impacted our self-esteem and the way that we view ourselves. So I think ultimately my message today is really about self-love, you know, and how that ripple effect can really help. Maybe not in the moment, but I think in the long term, for sure. Yeah.
I would like to bring in the brown hawk. I'm feeling the 10. And I would like to acknowledge the territory that we all walk upon.
Hi, my name is Keisha. I'm couching in Sault. I like to acknowledge the territory that we walk, live, eat on, and I like to bring in the snake.
My name is Janice. I am couching in Sault. I'd like to acknowledge the land that we live and walk on. I am feeling a 10, and I would like to bring in the salmon.
So we bring in so many people, resource people, into this program, and one resource person is Sarah Rude. She taught us about. She was taught by Skip and Butch on how to greet or have greetings and acknowledge territory. So she came in and we did a workshop on protocols and how we greet each other and as the different nations. We also brought in, what are you doing, Thomas? Are you doing, Thomas? Janice. We also brought in Sarah Root to teach us about drum making, and Janice would like to talk about the drums.
The drum beat that we drum reminds us of the heartbeat of when we were in our mother's womb, and when we sing high, we sing to the Creator, and when we sing low, we sing to Mother Earth. Yeah.
Regalia.
So the girls in this program, we learn to sing and dance. The hats that you see them, Keisha would like to talk to you about the regalia that's needed to complement all of the songs and dances that we sing. Keisha?
Okay. So we made hats. Cheyenne sewed the hats. She's right here. And we use the skin. We have skin on our hats. We have bear, mink, and rabbit, and ermine, and four-legged. Honor
The four-legged.
Honoring the four-legged, and yeah.
Thank you.
I'm just going to talk about my role.
And Cheyenne will talk to you about the coming of age.
Coming of age brings us responsibility to take care of ourselves and the world around us. We have learned to live by our cultural values, which consist of respect, humility, gratitude, and discipline, which help keep us strong. Our goal was to not become a statistic in the missing and murdered Indigenous women's crisis.
One of the backbones in this program is France, and I would like her to explain what she does, her role in here, and so forth.
I see my role in this as a mom. There's a lot I can teach my children, and there's a lot that I can't. I'm not Native. I don't have the culture. So I felt blessed when Jessica approached me with her idea of starting the coming of age group. And I see my role as facilitating the girls to connect to their culture, to allow Jessica to run the program here at my home so that I can participate in learning with the girls so that we're all learning together. So I can teach what I know, and then I can learn what I don't know along with the girls. So I feel so lucky that this program is running, and what we're giving the girls, and watching them bloom and speak their truth and speak in a way that it shows that they're strong young women. We have deep conversations about the issues in the world, the issues within our families. And I just think it's open doors that that is allowing them to grow into healthy, beautiful young women. Yeah.
France and I, we don't just tell the girls to do some Métis dot art or to make their drums, to make our hats. We do it right along with them. We see that it's important so that we know they know that it's important enough that we do it too. And even though when we were drawing our totem poles, getting ready to go on a field trip to the museum, France and our totem poles looked, it didn't even look like totem poles. We had a really good time you know, humbling ourselves to we stretched ourselves so that we could show them that we were just as interested and it was as important. And we went on our trip to the museum, and we all got ready to go to the museum. We went from each exhibit, and when we first got there, they said, "Oh, there's a Mayan." They were so enthused about the Mayan exhibit, and we told them, sat them down, and we said, "We want you to be as excited for the First Nations exhibit as you are the Mayan." With that, we went upstairs to the Our Living Languages exhibit, and we spent a lot of time in there, and they had to come out knowing a greeting in another language, knowing the statistics in the language and how it is, you know, being almost to extinction. And then we went and we went into the nest, the lullabies, and they saw the lullabies, and then we went into the different exhibits for all of the Haida, the Timshan, the Nuchalna, all of them, and looked at the differences in all of the masks and saw the differences and knew that it was because of the land. The land tells us, we taught them that the land tells us who we are. That's why the land is so important. That a teepee would never last on the West Coast, and but in the prairies it does. It's the strong longhouses that have to last on the West Coast. So the land is so important. And then they sang to the masks, because in their song and dance lessons they know that the masks are all that they're alive. So we walked around in the museum and they sang and woke up the masks in the museum.
Yeah.
That was a highlight in our group. They also learned to service the community. When it was Brad and Jen's anniversary, they went in and they set up, they cooked, they served, and they helped clean up. And a service to the community is so important. So with that, we'd like to know if you have any questions.
I don't. Donna, do you?
Nobody has any questions?
No, I think you guys have covered everything so far. It's great.
Okay. How many people are on there?
It's just it's just me and Laura right now, and then.
Oh, okay. Okay, so we're going to sing a closing song. We wanted to sing an opening song, and we're going to sing a closing song. And I'm going to just spring it on Cheyenne to explain the song to you. Okay, and how we got the right to sing it. Explain the song about the people going down 22 years ago.
The song is called The Animal Kingdom. It took place on Nettle Island, also known as Tlahoa. About 22 years ago, a group of language learners went to Nettle Island to do a Broken Hearts healing group.
Healing Hearts.
Healing Hearts. And a group of kids decided they wanted to go around the island. And as it was getting late, the tide came in and they were pushed towards the stinging nettle. One of the kids, Zach, jumped into the water to see if he could see the cabin around the corner. And he got caught in the rapids. Luckily for him, a whale came and pushed him back to shore. Not long after that, the search and rescue boats came and got them. Yeah, so this is the Animal Kingdom.
So the words to the song says, the whale brought them back to Tlahoa, the cabins, and the second verse says the ancestors brought them back. We were given permission by Sam Ayupis. Whenever I teach a program, I can use this song because my mother put the words in. Ya Hali, Ya and really want to appreciate what you're doing for bringing the highlights to the murdered and missing Indigenous cause, and we will continue to keep on facilitating this program to the best of our ability in the hopes that they will have a better future and that they will never become merci.
We just want to thank you very much for being part of this virtual event. Jessica, if you could please email me your mailing address.